Hello, how are you? My name is Winnie Barawa, and if you're new here, welcome. This is Medic Academy, and this is an online platform where we do lessons in medical field, and we discuss or we host sessions like in all the different topics and curriculum that we have. So it may vary from one to the other. So in today's class, welcome to our sessions on homeostasis. So what I love about this word homeostasis, it's how, like if you like yoga, how you try to balance yourself and your mind into this state of calmness. So our body is also like that. When it needs to put things in order, it has to establish what we call homeostasis. So if you're interested in content like this, kindly remember to subscribe, share, and also comment in our lessons and keep it locked till the end. So welcome and go on with me. So before we study this thing called homeostasis, we need to understand that it is firstly helping to maintain what we call the internal environment of our body. Yes, we have environment in our body. However, we have two types of environments. We have the external environment and then we have the internal environment. So the internal environment is the main focus for us here. But before that, we need to discuss both of them. So the external environment of our body is the environment which surrounds our body, the external, where we live, where we walk, where we go to do our normal things. That keeps our external environment. The main source is to be a source of nutrients, oxygen, nutrients and so on, which are very key and required by our cell for the different functions. But we have also the internal environment, which is also pronounced as milieu interior, or to simply mean internal. So this is the environment, or this is the water-based medium in which the body cells exist, where our body is located. That is the key part that homeostasis focuses on. So our cells are located in the interstitial, in the tissue fluid. But remember, inside the cell, in our previous class, we mentioned that there is cytoplasm. And this fluid that is contained in the cytoplasm, we call it intracellular fluid. Of course, it's part of our internal environment, but also all these fluids needs to be maintained at a balanced state. And that's what we are mentioning. So here are the fluids that we mentioned. Fluids compartments are areas where the fluid nature of our body are found in, and we have two categories of fluids compartments. We have the intracellular fluid compartment here, which contains the cytoplasm or contains the cytosol, the cytoplasmic fluid that is within our cell, or fluid that is found within our cell. However, any other fluid that is found outside the cell, we will call it interstitial fluid. For example, this is fluid found in between our cells. So this is interstitial fluid, which forms part of extracellular fluid. So this is fluid outside our cell, extracellular, extra out, so outside the cell. But fluid that is specifically found in between the cell is called interstitial fluid. However, we can find other fluids like within the vessels. This one we'll call it intravascular fluid, but the right name is plasma. So that's how we can summarize this. This we've done it in our prior class where we were discussing inorganic compounds under the class of water. So if you want to learn more about fluids and compartments and all that, I will advise you get that link. I will link it down below so that you can get it from the description of this video so you can understand it more. But that's what compartments are. We have extracellular fluid compartments and intracellular fluid compartments. And this forms key part of our internal environment, which is the main focus of the interstitial fluid. So, having mentioned extracellular fluid, that this is fluid found outside the cell. But also, we've mentioned that there is intracellular fluid. This is fluid found inside the cell. Now, we are assuming because there is mentioning of the cell, extra, intra, and all that, and we are thinking this fluid could be similar. No, these two fluids are very, very different. the minerals and ions and elements that are contained in these two fluids are not the same in terms of concentration. So it's being said that the extracellular fluid here contains large amount of sodium, chlorides, bicarbonates, ions, and also has a lot of nutrients, including issues like oxygen, glucose, fatty acids, amino acids, and so on. It has some components like carbon dioxide and other cell waste materials, but when it comes to the intracellular fluids, it's a little bit different when it comes to the amount of components it has. It has more of potassium, magnesium, and phosphate instead of the large amount of sodium and chloride. So to make this description easier, I've generated this slide here. Let me move it to the next so that you can make it easy. Diagram. So we've mentioned these compartments, extracellular fluid compartment and the intracellular fluid compartment. And we are saying that the molecules, the ions and the elements in these two are not the same. Like we've said, in the extracellular fluid, there is more of nutrients and sodium and all these chlorides and bicarbonates. But when it comes to the intra, the components are a little bit different. So we'll just do comparison of it. So for example, starting with sodium, the extracellular fluid is said to have more sodium compared to the intracellular fluid. While when it comes to potassium, there's more in the intra than in the extra. So the extracellular fluid has low potassium while the intra has more potassium. The imbalance here is very key. The aspect that extracellular has more sodium and intra has more potassium, very key, because what it does is it participates in establishing what we call the sodium potassium pump, which is essential in establishing action potential that will assist when it comes to the nervous system in establishing issues like nervous conduction, muscle contraction and relaxation. All these are very key. Then let's move to chloride. So it's more concentrated in the extracellular and less concentrated in the intracellular. Bicarbonates, more concentrated in the extracellular fluid and less in the intracellular fluid. Magnesium is only found in the extracellular, while nutrients on the other side, they are more contained in the extracellular fluid than in the intracellular fluid. And I hope you understand why. Extra is simply outside the cell, so it's found in the in between the cells and other areas. So meaning all the digested materials and minerals and all that will automatically be deposited in these spaces. So having understood that homeostasis will be balancing this environment, the internal environment, extracellular fluids and intracellular fluid. So what is homeostasis? By definition, this is maintenance of the internal environment within narrow limits or fairly constant state. So to help us achieve this state of balance of our internal environment within narrow limits or changes, we use two types of mechanisms. And one of the mechanism is called the positive feedback mechanism and the negative feedback mechanism. So these two mechanisms are very key in helping us maintain our homeostasis. Positive feedback and negative feedback. So let's see let's explore and see what they all mean. So talking about mechanisms, these are types like control systems. So we're saying they help in establishing the homeostasis or the narrow difference in our internal environment. And we're being told that a control system, in this case a positive or a negative feedback mechanism system, it has three basic components. That it has, number one, what we call the detectors, sensors or receptors, and then it has a control center, and then it has the effectors. So what are the role of each and all of these three parts? For the detector, sensor, and receptor, we will use the receptor as the main word here. Although you may hear me interchanging with sensor and detector once in a while, but the main word we will use is the receptor. So now, this internal environment of ours that we have has this ability to change because there's so many chemicals reacting and metabolism taking place. So the body environment tends to change once in a while. So who will detect these changes? This is where we have the receptors. So the receptors are simply areas which are known for detecting changes in our internal environment. So for example, if the temperature is increasing and is becoming high, the receptors will pick the hyperthermia and send it now to the second part where we are calling the control center. So the control center in our body, mostly it's the brain, because this is the set point where we will be comparing all these changes and giving a decision of what should happen. So it's the control center. Mostly the brain is the one that does this for us. We can talk about the nervous system, composing of the central and the peripheral nervous system. So in this case, the control center is the place where the change is compared and determination is made on what levels the change has taken place. But after the control center has made a decision, it will send that information to the effectors, so that the effectors are areas that will implement the change to bring back our body system into normal environment. So if it is temperatures that were very high, our effectors will work around it and ensure that the temperatures have gone down into their required levels. So I hope that makes sense, that a basic control mechanism needs to have a receptor, control center, and an effector. So let's start with the first mechanism that we call negative feedback mechanism. So by definition, the negative feedback mechanism, it's an effector response, or it's a mechanism response that decreases or negates the effect of the original stimulus, as a result helping us to restore the homeostasis. So with negative feedback, it operates in the opposite direction of where the stimulus is behaving. So if the stimulus is increasing temperature, with negative feedback mechanism, we will try to reduce the temperature, ensuring that the temperature goes back to normal. If the temperature was reducing, the negative feedback mechanism will operate in a way that the temperature will go up, that we can take it to the normal values. So which systems in our body employ a lot of times in the negative feedback mechanism? So we have the temperature control systems, we have the water and electrolyte concentrations, mostly happening within our kidneys. We have the pH, or the levels of hydrogen, that is balancing our acidity or alkalinity of the body fluids. We have blood glucose levels, there is blood and tissue oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, and there is also blood pressure. In short, the negative feedback mechanism is the most used mechanism by our body systems when it comes to balancing the changes in our body system. All the way, as you can see, temperature, water and electrolyte balancing, pH balancing, blood sugar balancing, blood and tissue oxygen balancing, pressure, and so many more examples that use this mechanism. So maybe to explore a few. So negative, we are saying it takes the opposite direction, or it negates the response or the response of the stimulus. So the essence here is, under normal condition, we expect our body's internal environment to be balanced. But in some cases, the normal environment can go beyond normal, we talk about above normal, or it can go below the normal. So the stimulus can cause an effect that takes it below. So in all this, the negative feedback mechanism will only be trying to take it back to the normal, or be taking it to the opposite direction. So with stimulus that is going above, the negative feedback will be taking it in the opposite. So if it was a temperature going up, it will reduce it. So if it was 38 degrees, it will reduce it to like 37 or 36.8 and all that. If the temperature was below, maybe it was like 34 degrees, then it will increase it and take it up, to like 36 again or 37 degrees. So negative feedback mechanism negates, the word negative negates or minuses or decreases or opposes the actions of the stimulus. So here's our temperature illustrations, and we've used this like in our session here. So when the temperature falls, and here we're talking about cases where the body is almost going into hypothermia, what happens is your body needs to work around it so that we can restore the temperature to normal values. So the temperature is low, there's a way our body behaves, and one of it is construction of the blood vessels so that our heat is conserved. The sweat glands tend to stop secreting sweat so that we can maintain the fluids within our body system so that there's no evaporation, which is one of the ways of how we lose heat. And then our muscles can shiver involuntarily, helping us generate heat and keep our body warm. Now, when we are doing this, when you have that state of hypothermia, heat tends to accumulate in our body, and this will help change the temperature values in our body system, and the body tends to go back to normal. But on the other side, if the temperature has risen above normal, there's a way on how our body needs to lose part of the heat so that our temperature can lower and go to normal. So how does it behave? Number one, the blood vessels here will dilate. So we'll have blood vessels dilating so that we have heat loss, getting to be lost into our environment. But again, the sweat glands will become very active and secrete a lot of sweat. So when sweat is released into our skin, it tends to evaporate. And when this evaporation process is happening, it loses part of the heat from our body also. So heat is lost from our body, and the temperature in this case will be lost. The heat will be lost and the temperature will go down. So as a result, our body temperature then will go down, or it will be taken into the normal levels. So this is all negative feedback mechanism, negating the actions of the stimulus. But now we have the positive feedback mechanism. This one, it's the state whereby the stimulus works in conjunction with this is a mechanism whereby it works in conjunction with the stimulus, progressively increasing its intensity. So it increases the effects of the stimulus. So this positive mechanism increases the effect of the stimulus. So if the stimulus is increasing or it's working on a certain metabolism, it will make it more and more intense. Where do we find this mechanism? We find it in blood clotting processes. We find it during labor, where we talk about uterine contraction during pregnant cases. So here's how positive mechanism works during the blood clotting process. So when there's an injury and someone has a bleeder or has an area that has been injured and bleeding is taking place, for us to succeed in establishing a blood clotting process or to stop the bleeding, we need continuous release of the clotting factors or production of platelets. So for us to have these platelets produced, we need this active or boosted activation that needs to happen for us to have all these platelets coming in and clotting factors released to ensure that this coagulation process keeps on. However, if that doesn't happen, and for example, maybe someone has a sickness and this process is affected, then this person may have an issue with clotting. So it means they may have excessive bleeding and suffer from hemorrhagic shock. So the positive feedback mechanism here, yes, it is exaggerating the stimulus, but it is exaggerating it for positive outcomes. Because the more you activate clotting factors, the more platelets are getting released and they will form the platelet plug that will stop the bleeding. So this is how the clotting works. Activates more, releases clotting factors, stops the bleeding. But however, when it comes to the uterine contractions, the process is the same, but here unfortunately that it comes with a lot of pain. So however, we release more of oxytocin. In this case, it's secreted, but you need to understand that the more oxytocin you release, the more pain the woman keeps feeling. But we need that oxytocin so that we can successfully deliver the baby during second stage. So how is positive mechanism working here? It's short, for us to have a positive, safe delivered baby, we need to have continuous production of oxytocin. Now, with positive mechanism, we are saying we need to keep the stimulus increasing in intensity till the outcome is achieved. So in this case, the outcome is delivery of the baby. And for us to deliver the baby, we need oxytocin to be released and to promote more uterine contraction and descent of this child. So what happens is we will release more oxytocin until the baby is delivered. The beauty of it is once the baby is delivered, then the positive mechanism will stop because there'll be no need of releasing more oxytocin and there's no more baby to release or to deliver in this case. So positive mechanism works as long as the outcome has not yet been achieved, there'll be a continuation of that stimulus until the goal is achieved. So that's how positive mechanism does. Once the goal has been achieved, it will recede or it will lessen and just finish the role. So to finish up, we need to understand that homeostatic imbalances happen. However, our body is always active with the positive and the negative feedback mechanism to ensure that there is no abnormal change that can threaten our health or can threaten our life. Because temperatures keep changing in our body, sugar levels keep changing, the blood pressure keeps changing, but our body is active to ensure that there is no imbalances that can be detrimental or threatening to our normal life activities. So the imbalancing is continuous, but it works in levels that ensures the changes are not significant and they do not cause any harm to our bodies. And that marks the end of our class. Once again, if this content is beautiful and is impacting in your life, don't forget to subscribe or click on the subscribe button, be part of our class sessions. There are those who love writing notes, that's beautiful. You can also share, comment, and suggest to us ways on how we can improve on this place, on these sessions. Thank you so much and see you in our class, in our next sessions.